In food safety systems, oftentimes we set up different rules or policies for how the food safety system should function within a food manufacturing or agri-processing environment. And once upon a time, these rules are very prescriptive. They would say, this is exactly what you should do. What we're seeing right now in many of the different food safety frameworks that are used around the world is a move towards what are called outcomes based systems. And the idea behind it is not to set rules, but instead focus on what is the outcome. Inevitably, the outcome always is going to be safe and high quality food. But how do we then build the systems within it so that instead of us going and saying, this is exactly what you must do, instead we say, we need to come up with this outcome. So in this video, we're going to go and explore this principle between directives-based versus outcomes-based food regulations and food policies. So jumping into this video, outcomes versus directives, at the end of this video, you will be able to explain the difference between outcomes-based rules and regulations versus directive-based rules and regulations. And you will be able to understand when you may observe or apply outcomes versus directives. And this is all going to be applied in respect to HACCP and quality management systems and food systems. So I took this photo. You can see me smiling so happily at you. Hooray for hairnuts is the caption here. And I put this photo up because when we talk about outcomes versus directives, oftentimes people say, well, what's the big deal? Why do we care about this? Well, if I were to go in and talk about my hairnet here, the directive would be, in this food manufacturing facility, you must wear a hairnet and you must wear a face mask as provided by the company. Now, this just happens to be one that I've kept in my desk from back when I was in the industry, and you can see it's pretty aggressive. Yes, it's got a whole collar and everything. But if I was to go into the outcomes base, their whole reason for being this, if I can use the term severe, with their hairnet was that they really didn't want us to have any potential contamination from our hair or from our talking and sneezing and coughing that could cause contamination of the food product. This was a company that was extremely vigilant when it came to Staphylococcus aureus or Listeria. And so they were really, really wanting to make sure that everything was done. So the outcome was, let's make sure that we don't cross-contaminate the food product. And the directive was, you will wear this hairnet, you will wear this balaclava, you will wear this face mask. And I am a firm believer that we've got to figure out how to prevent contamination, but how do we do it? So if we really see the difference there, a directives-based framework tells people specifically what they need to do. And it doesn't explain why, it doesn't give a purpose, but it's really clear. This is what you need to do. You must wear this hairnet, you must wear this face mask. Versus an outcomes-based language, you will see that the language states what should happen. So the outcome in the previous example would be, let's make sure that within this framework, hair does not become a contamination risk for the product. It doesn't tell you how to get to that state. And so these two different strategies have to work hand in hand with each other. So let's jump back to our example one. Directive-based, an employee must wear a hairnet and face mask at all times. And if you really think about it, we're telling the employee, this is exactly what you must do. Versus an outcomes-based language, we would see an employee must ensure that hair does not contaminate the food. But it doesn't say how. So for example, could that employee wear a bandana or could they wear a baseball cap? You could make the argument that those provide a way that the hair doesn't contaminate the food. Likewise, you could say employee must ensure actions such as talking, coughing, or sneezing do not contaminate the food. Well, the face mask then allows that directive so that coughing, talking, sneezing isn't causing spit or mucus to fly out from the mouth and enter into the food product. But could I also, for example, use other means of preventive control, such as having a plastic shield over the workstation so that I could work freely? Or maybe I've got different ventilation requirements, or maybe instead of that really horrible face mask that you saw in my photo earlier, that we've got something perhaps that's a little bit better in terms of manufacturing quality. Long story short, you can see a slight nuance in the different ways the language is structured. Here's a second example. And this time I actually jumped in from the outcomes based, which we have in the right hand column. And I actually found an outcomes based statement in one of the codes that we'll be talking about in our HACCP systems, SQF, the Safe Quality Food Program. So I found a clause that was an outcomes based clause. Protective clothing shall be manufactured from material that will not pose a food safety threat and is easily cleaned. Well, we within our organization could write a standard operating procedure or an employee policy stating, using directives language, an employee shall wear the uniform provided by management. Clean uniforms are available for exchange in the laundry area. So now the employee has access to a product or material that's going to fulfill the outcome. And we are making sure that it's going to be cleaned for them. Now, where do you see each style? Directives-based language tends to be in in-house standard operating procedures and in employee guidelines written by the company, because that's where you have gone through the process of deciding what is the most logical for your organization. Outcomes-based language we tend to see in a lot of the regulations, and we see it in the international codes for HACCP and quality management systems. And so, again, why? Because they're going to use a really broad language so that every organization can find the system that works for them. And then organizations themselves tend to use directives-based language for their operating procedures. And so why does this matter? Well, outcomes allows for you within the management team that you're building around your food safety and quality program to build in sustainability. It can allow for you to have consensus on what the best and most logical practice could be. And it allows you to think really logically, what's going to work in our facility and what's going to work for the way that we need to manage our employees. And so outcomes language is really meaningful, but it's not going to tell you what to do. And that's where you've got to take that time and brainstorm as a team to figure out what's there. Then you can move it into directives language. That is where it's clearest and it's easiest to manage. And you can set up a really clear expectation for employees so that you can build up a compliance culture. And that's where you're building up the sense of this is what we need to do and this is why we need to do it. And so we just go on and do it. So this matters, and I hope that you have a clear sense of the difference between outcomes versus directives language at this point.